Welcome to the Landlord Profitability Playbook Podcast, where we share the best practices we use to help our residential real estate investor clients automate their rent collection and get on with their lives. Check out the show notes at landlordprofitabilityplaybookpodcast.com. This show is brought to you by Roost Real Estate Company Property Management. To learn more about the services we provide, visit investwithroost.com. Now, here's your host, Chris McAllister.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Landlord Profitability Playbook Podcast. I'm Chris McAllister, and I'm here to create and coach business opportunities and strategies that support and add value to the lives of residential real estate investors. Joining me today are my trusted co-hosts, Laci, LeBlanc, and Gretchen Mitchell. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Laci is our guru of all things marketing, specifically digital marketing, and Gretchen is our Director of Property Management at Roost Real Estate Company. So today we're diving into part 6 of our series, What to Expect from Your Property Manager. And this episode is titled, Do They Have a Clear and Unbiased Selection Process for Applicants? Well, we have to admit that this is one of the drier episodes that, we will have out there, but it is critical information. And if you are considering hiring a property manager or switching property managers, this is definitely part of that interview and due diligence process. So what prompted this episode is that in April of this year, 2024, HUD issued updated tenant screening guidelines. And these new guidelines are designed to ensure fair and non-discriminatory practices in the tenant screening processes. So what I want to do today is kick off by revisiting fundamental principles of fair housing laws. And today we're going to use Ohio's law as an example. And knowledge and fundamental embracing of these laws it's critical for any reputable property management company. If you don't comply with these, not only are you doing bad things, but you're also outside of the law. And that kind of behavior, of course, can really make a mess of your real estate investments. So we're going to talk about the key points in the guidance, the responsibilities of housing providers and tenant screening companies to avoid discriminatory practices. We're going to talk about a bit about the impact of advanced technologies like artificial intelligence in tenant screening and ensuring that those technologies are not used in ways that are ultimately discriminatory. And we're going to talk a little bit about best practices for fair and non-discriminatory tenant screening and talk about actually focusing on the relevant and, of course, accurate data that can be surfaced when a company does their tenant screening. Finally, we're going to provide some practical tips on how to evaluate and ensure your property manager screening process is compliant. And again, and on top of that, just to round out this rousing episode, we're going to talk about developing clear written screening policies that are available to the public and ensuring that their data is accurate and things to look for to make sure that this company is providing, or the companies that you're looking at are providing transparency as well as detailed explanations to applicants if they are turned down.
Yeah, so this is like the what to expect from your property manager episode, but I feel like this one is really very applicable to people who are doing it themselves too, right? So this is one of the advantages to having a property management company, right, is that they should, if they don't, then you're maybe with the wrong company, but they should have all of these systems and processes in place. But one of the disadvantages to being one of the nanas out there, right, who's doing their own property management is that you don't have all of these systems and processes in place necessarily. So I feel like DIYers are going to get a lot of value out of this one too.
I think you're right. It is a little dull. It is something I'm afraid that we tend to take for granted. And I do think it's important that we get it out there. So just to kind of start from first principles, and again, I'm going to use Ohio as an example, but I'm going to read this paragraph or two. And, a property manager licensed by the state they do business in, they live and die by this, right? This is the thing that can just destroy a property management business and in turn, really harm in an investor's rental business. So it is illegal pursuant to Ohio Fair Housing Law, blah, 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 blah. And again, I don't even want to do that. I know it's dull. I'm going to read it. It is illegal pursuant to the Ohio Fair Housing Law, Division H of Section 4112.02 of the Revised Code and the Federal Fair Housing Law, 42 USCA 3601, as amended, to refuse to sell, transfer, assign, rent, lease, sublease, or finance housing accommodations, refuse to negotiate for the sale or rental of housing accommodations, or otherwise deny or make unavailable housing accommodations because of race, color, religion, sex, familial status, as defined in Section 4112.01 of the Revised Code. So familiar status is, they provide a little bit of additional detail throughout the statute. But in addition to those things, it's also ancestry, military status, disability, national origin, and you can't discriminate in the form of advertising the sale or rental of housing, in the financing of housing, or in the provision of real estate brokerage services. It is also illegal to profit, to induce, or attempt to induce a person to sell or rent a dwelling by representations regarding the entry into the neighborhood of a person or persons belonging to one of the protected classes. So that word salad basically says that you as a landlord, your property manager, and any of the vendors that you may employ to run your business, none of them in any way, shape, or form, whether it's advertising, whether it's the analytics they use, the AI they use, can result in anything that could be construed as discriminatory against those protected classes. And I think it's good to get scared every once in a while just to keep us straight. So I'm already feeling a little scared. Gretchen?
Of course, I'm scared of this every day, but we make sure we have those processes in place so our fear is under control.
Yeah. But the cornerstone of any reputable property management company selection criteria is strict adherence to fair housing laws, federal, state, and local. There's nothing more important than what they do for you. And it's imperative that you as a owner, as a client, confirm that the company does not discriminate based on race, color, religion, sex, familial status, ancestry, military status, disability, or national origin. You can't just take for granted that they're not. You have a responsibility to ensure that the company you're hiring is not. It's not just their problem. It's your problem, Mr. Landlord. You have to ensure, and you should ensure, that the company has clear policies and training in place to uphold these principles, and that reflects their commitment to ethical and legal practices. So we're going to put the actual HUD guidelines, exactly what they published, a link to that in our show notes of this episode. But it sort of comes back to what we talked about the last time we got together, where what you want to find in your property management company is an attitude that I think is best described, that they want to screen in qualified applicants. Their goal is not to screen out qualified applicants. So as we go through this, I just want to sort of keep that top of mind. Our job as property managers and leasing professionals is to screen in, not out. So I'm going to kind of go through quickly key points in that guidance. I'm certainly not going to read through that entire document, but I think it's something that you should at least familiarize yourself with. So key point 1, Fair Housing Act compliance. Screening practices must comply with the Fair Housing Act, which prohibits discrimination on all of those things that we've been talking about. Both housing providers and tenant screening companies are responsible for ensuring non-discriminatory practices. So this new HUD update makes clear that it's not just the landlord and the property manager, it's the tenant screening company that is also responsible for ensuring non-discriminatory practices. Tenant screening companies often use advanced technologies like AI, which can lead to less transparent processes. And housing providers should ensure that these technologies are not used in discriminatory ways. So again, according to HUD, the onus is on the property owner as well as their property manager and the whatever technology service or third-party companies they're using to run their business. As far as best practices, HUD urges all of us to use criteria when screening in, use criteria that are relevant to predicting whether applicants will comply with tenancy obligations. So obviously what we're looking at there is, will they pay the rent? Will they pay it on time? Will they pay it through the term of their lease? Will they leave the property in better shape when they leave than it was in when they moved in? Will they they won't do anything to restrict the quiet enjoyment of the neighbors and so forth. So you're only looking, when you're screening, is to screen in folks that are going to be able to comply with the terms of the lease. Anything else, quite frankly, is discriminatory. So screen in, not out.
It sounds like to me there that so we all have our biases, right? Like, and where you live and who you are and how you're raised and whatever contributes to that. But so we all have these things kind of subconsciously that we think about other people. And, if we don't have these in place, we're going to apply those to the situation, just again, subconsciously. So it sounds like to me that like fair housing is important because fair housing is important. You don't want to, break any laws and you don't want to be punished for it. But also it sounds like this kind of screening in versus out process is how you get the best tenants.
It right? is. So and again, I think that's nice of you to say so, because it goes back to episode 5 that, you've got to cast a wide net to find, as many qualified applicants as you possibly can. So as we discussed in the last episode, we come back to here, everything comes down to screening in, not screening out. And all of these best practices are intertwined. It's hard.
As much as it hurts to say that sometimes we're, our biases are wrong or we're wrong, it feels like, having these processes in place and these systems in place can maybe challenge some of those and get us good tenants that maybe we wouldn't have selected on our own, because what in the tenant history or the tenant record or the recommendations that you get from other landlords, what actually indicates that they're going to pay their rent, that they're going to, stay through the lease, that they're going to leave it better than they found it. So by not just relying on, a number or, a set of criteria and being a little more, open about it, it sounds like you can really open yourself up to finding some better tenants too. I think
you also have to
a nice
kind
side
of
effect.
Ask those questions too. So if we run a credit report or a criminal background and something comes up that we're kind of questioning, we always call that person and say, tell me what happened. What was the situation? Why is this on this report? And we have that conversation. Maybe it's something that, your mind goes to something immediately when you see, a charge on someone's background. But if you have that conversation, you get the whole picture, and maybe it's not as bad as what you thought originally.
Yeah, it happens all the time. You're absolutely right. And you live with it every day, Gretch.
Yeah.
But so best practice, what HUD is basically telling us we have to do, it's not a proposal, it's the law. So again, we have to use only criteria that is relevant to predicting whether applicants will comply with their tenancy obligations. The landlord and the property manager have to ensure of the accuracy of the records they're using in screening. So in other words, we as property managers just can't take for granted whatever the screening company we might be using or the credit bureau that we're using might be telling us. And we have to avoid criteria that is so broad that it will unjustifiably exclude applicants. So again, screen in, not out. HUD also talks a lot about transparency and, most importantly, consistency. So your property manager needs to have clear, detailed, and here's a key point, publicly available screening policies. This isn't us talking. This isn't just doing good work. This is HUD talking, Housing and Urban Development. And you have to provide applicants with detailed reasons for denial and allow them to challenge negative information. How often does that happen, Gretchen?
It does happen. I mean, that's just kind of what I went back to, oh, we had to deny you because your criminal background. Well, here's what actually happened. Or here, I'm in the process of fighting this. Or, yes, my landlord evicted me. However, here's all the documentation that I have as to why I wasn't paying my rent, or I put it in escrow. You just have to have those other conversations.
And it takes time and it takes effort. And I think a lot of times it's very, very easy for a property manager or property management company to not go that deep into an applicant's history or an applicant's application. And it's really easy to just skip over, quote, the hard ones and go look for the easy ones. And at the end of the day, that can lead to a discriminatory outcome. So housing providers retain liability for discriminatory screening practices, even if they outsource screening to a third party. Screening companies can also be held liable for facilitating discriminatory decisions. So when you do sit down and you're talking to a new property manager, property management company, and you're evaluating their process, have they developed clear screening policies? Have they created detailed written screening policies that specify the criteria and standards used for tenant selection? Have they ensured that these policies are publicly available to applicants and easily accessible? You will find that I would go on a limb to say not many property management companies have done that. I can also say, though, that the very best in the business have done that. And we're going to provide copies of links to ours at Bruce Real Estate Company in the show notes. They also HUD suggests, and what we want you to ask and look for is, your property manager should avoid using, quote, off-the-shelf products from screening companies. Instead, they need to customize the criteria and standards to align with HUD policies, their company policies, and avoiding overbroad. Ensure accuracy and relevance. The property manager needs to regularly audit the data sources and processes used by the screening company to ensure accuracy and relevance of the information. And they need to exclude irrelevant records, just as Gretchen, you were saying, old or minor offenses, for instance, if it shows up on a criminal, and focus on the most predictive criteria, which again is, do they have a history of paying the rent on time and taking care of the property? At the end of the day,
talk to those landlords. Talking to those landlords will get you that answer. But it also goes back to, is that landlord just trying to get them to move? Do they want them to stay? Are they going to tell the truth? But, we bring them in and we actually interview those people too that are applying and say, here's what we found, what's going on, and just have that conversation with them. Yeah.
Transparency with applicants. Provide applicants with a clear explanation of the screening process and criteria before they apply. Now, we do this basically with every single listing, we have on the website. We say exactly what we're looking for in an applicant and what they have to bring to the table when they make their application. Basically 3 times the rent amount, so on and so forth. Yeah.
Right.
And if an application is denied, the property manager has to be able to give detailed reasons and instructions on how to challenge the decision, or they have the applicant gets the opportunity to provide mitigating information. The property manager needs to train their staff on fair housing and non-discriminatory screening practices, no matter how boring. It's just got to be in the fabric of the business. And they have to regularly monitor their screening processes and outcomes to ensure compliance. Finally, does the property manager engage with the screening company? Do they work closely with their third-party company to understand their methodologies, right, and ensure that they align with what to be correct policies for your investment business? And obviously those have to be non-discriminatory. And the other suggestion is to require the screening company to provide detailed reports and, of course, maintain transparency. So, I know you and Brenda all the time are challenged by owners, especially when something's not getting rented fast enough to be able to show, well, what kind of applications did you get? Why did you think that they weren't worthy, and so forth? And I know that you and Brenda, our leasing manager, work very, very hard to make sure that we always have that information at our fingertips in order to share that with our owners.
We do.
So again, we've added links in the show notes to the actual HUD dot and to the policies and procedures we've adopted at our company. So feel free to take a look at those, do with them as you will. We also, for us, it's super important that I feel like we have an obligation to educate tenants. Now, everybody has to be responsible for themselves, but quite frankly, we meet applicants all the time of all ages and backgrounds that really don't have a clue about what it means to be a successful tenant or to successfully apply for a place to live. So I feel like we have a job. Part of our job is to educate tenants, and that sort of ties in with, our thoughts about Learn with Roost and our new resource.
It's a hub.
Yeah, the hub, the All Things Real Estate Hub that Laci is working on actually this month, which is really about not just educating owners, but educating agents, educating buyers, sellers, and ultimately tenants as well. So we're going to put this in the show notes, but we actually have the document Roost Real Estate Tenant Screening Guidelines. So this document, and again, I'm only going to try to hit the high points here, is designed to educate applicants and tenants as to how we do business at Roost. So, of course, it leads off with, we are committed to fair and equal housing opportunities for all applicants. Our tenant screening process ensures a non-discriminatory evaluation based on relevant criteria that predict the ability to comply with tenancy obligations. Here's what you need to know. So we talk in this document about rental history. We consider past evictions only if they occurred within the last 5 years and were not due to circumstances unlikely to recur, i.e. job loss or domestic violence. We prioritize consistent payment of rent and responsible behavior. Credit scores are considered, but are not the sole factor in our decisions. We also look at consistent income and government assistance, i.e. Section 8, housing choice vouchers, et cetera. And we are required, so if our general guideline is that an applicant has to make 3 times the rent amount and show us pay stubs to support that, that income can also include vouchers, right? So, if regardless of the percentage, if that voucher gets them to quote 3 times the rent amount or whatever your standard is, then that is considered legitimate income. Credit issues related to one-time events, medical emergencies, and domestic violence will be disregarded if properly documented. So this isn't, just a free-for-all that somebody gets to say, oh no, that's not true. It was this, and this. We've got to see something that supports that. We evaluate criminal records based on the nature, severity, and recency of offenses without blanket exclusions. Applicants can present evidence of rehabilitation and mitigating circumstances. Arrests without convictions will not be considered. And that's not just Roost, that is HUD also. Income and employment. Our income requirements are reasonable, and we consider all income sources, including benefits and vouchers. Employment history is reviewed for stability with understanding and flexibility for non-traditional or intermittent employment. So again, it's about a demonstrated history of paying the rent. We use criteria related to tenancy responsibilities, such as maintaining the property and adhering to community rules. Again, the quiet enjoyment clause. We apply all criteria consistently to avoid discrimination. And then we go through the application process. You must complete a rental application and provide the necessary documentation. If you don't, your application will be discarded. We verify rental history, credit information, criminal records, income and employment details. You will be informed about our screening criteria and process when you apply. If your application is denied, you will receive a detailed explanation with reasons for the decisions and instructions on how to challenge. You can challenge any disqualifying information by providing evidence of inaccuracy or mitigating circumstances. We make rental decisions based on all relevant information and ensure compliance with fair housing laws. That is a public document for us that we make available on demand to any tenant applicant. And in the show notes, again, we're making that available to you, the listener.
So it sounds like we talk about being in the shelter business, right? And how that's not just like, it feels good probably when somebody comes in and they have a one-time occurrence that they're able to explain, and you're able to give them housing. Because I know from helping, Nana with her properties, that a lot of folks out there, renters, are frustrated, well, I don't have excellent credit, otherwise I'd buy a house, or, some things have happened in my past, and, I'm rehabilitated, or it wasn't my fault, or whatever. There is a lot of frustration out there. So I do imagine it feels pretty good for, you guys, Gretchen, in the office, for somebody to get somebody in a home, right? But that's not the point. The point is landlord profitability, right? So being in the shelter business, it feels good, the way that you guys do it, but it's also the most profitable way to do it. And I think that's a really important point to make, because this is a lot of work that most people don't do. And, the feel good part of it that probably, makes some people think, oh, well, they're just, that can't be the best way to do it. It's too lenient, or it's too this, or it's too that, or it just doesn't live up to my expectations of what the process is supposed to look like. But the point is profitability. And that's really, in the end, your profitability and your owner's profitability are the bottom line, pun intended.
Yeah. I tell you, the last couple of weeks, I've come across just some information as I do my own research and try to be open to what's happening in the market. But there seems a trend, certainly in Columbus, for property management companies to sort of extend COVID protocol into the indefinite future. And Gretchen, you and I both know, I think we've counted 3 companies that literally don't have offices, or at least not offices where tenants can not just show up or make an appointment even, but where there's literally nobody to talk to. Right. So, there's one extreme in this business where people are trying to use technology. People are trying to sort of, run their property management companies sort of like an Amazon website, where there's as little human touch as possible. And I get that. I would say, if we have 1,000 households that we're looking after, I bet you, my gosh, it's probably 2 to 3%, 20 or 30 tenants that Brenda or you or Marcy or Shannon spend the vast majority of their time with. And quite frankly, from a profitability standpoint for us, those 2 to 3% of the people who have issues, it takes a lot of payroll. Yes, and I have to tell you, I personally, I think the other folks are being a bit short-sighted. I think that this is a people business. I think, like everything else in life, we tend to, we manage by exception, but the folks that hit that 2, 3, maybe 5% on a bad month that we're able to help set straight, or on the other side of it, let's put it this way. There's 2 ways those people with issues can go, right? They legitimately can deserve our help, and we can get them into a place. They're happy. The owner's happy. We're happy. The other thing that happens when you take the time for that is, yes, there are times when you don't put somebody in after doing the due diligence, and it feels like it's a waste of time. But that is also a benefit to the owner, that we just didn't take the easy way out and stick somebody in that should have been put in there too. So I think that's important. But when we talk about landlord profitability, that is critical, and making sure that you never end up with a fair housing complaint, or God forbid, more than a complaint. That is critical also. So, our company, call it high tech, high touch. I feel like we use all of the technology that we need to use to facilitate, belly to belly relationships. And the day that, we shut down and decide that we're not going to allow conversations between us or our team and applicants or tenants is the day, quite frankly, I think I close the doors.
I think that's fair. You still need to have people come in, and a lot of the times, honestly, it's like the highlight of some of their months. So they come in, they get to see Marcy, they say hi. One lady brings in cookies sometimes, they tell us about what happened that month. They have a good time coming in. So it's not always even complaints that you have to deal with. It's also just, hey, I get to see Deb from Riverview today. She's coming in.
And the other nice thing is all that now is rolling into our Google reviews, right? So that daily interaction or that monthly interaction or whatever, I think that's what's reflected in the quality of our Google reviews that we've been able to grow over the past few months. The only reason we have those 4.9 stars is because of the people who are interacting on a daily basis with the tenants, and that's Marcy, it's Shannon, it's Brenda, it's the maintenance guys. And if you don't do that, and if you don't invite them to, did I earn a 5-star review today? If you don't approach the job with that type of attitude, it's just not good for the entire business. And when you do approach the job with that kind of attitude, the halo effect on the entire business, the brokerage business, the sales business, the management business, all of those things just gets better and better. So anyway, I digress, but we're not ready to give up on people. And I'm pretty sure that Housing and Urban Development doesn't want us to either.
Right.
So the wrap up. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's episode. So a couple of key points here. Please make sure your property manager understands the importance of compliance with fair housing laws. Discriminatory practices, intentional or not, are both illegal and unethical. Discriminatory practices, whether intentional or not, are both illegal and unethical. And remember, your property manager mistakes become your mistakes. It's crucial for both housing providers and tenant screening companies to ensure non-discriminatory practices. Housing and Urban Development is cracking down as more and more managers rely on technologies and AI to do their jobs for them. And again, we are really seeing this happen in real time, certainly in Columbus, Ohio. So as an owner, I urge you to stay informed about changes in fair housing laws and guidelines. Subscribe to industry newsletters, follow the news, whether it's Bigger Pockets or some of the other, huge websites out there that cater to investors, or of course our blogs and our podcast. Stay informed, stay up to date. Hiring a property manager does not mean that you give up responsibility for the overall health of your investments. It's like I've said many, many times. People think that real estate is a passive investment, but it's not. You have to be involved. You have to collaborate with your team. You've got to pay attention. So I hope this episode gives you more of what you need to get the best performance possible from your current or future property manager. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you have any questions or want to dive deeper into any of these topics, feel free to reach out to us at www.investwithroost.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us continue to provide valuable insights and tips to help you succeed as a residential real estate investor. Join us next time as we continue our series with more valuable insights on property management and landlord profitability.